It is a privilege to talk to both of you on this day when we commemorate and honor the legacy of Dr. King. And I really appreciate your time. Pastor Nabors is senior pastor of one of the oldest Black churches in Evanston, I think the second oldest, Second Baptist Church. And he's president of the Evanston NAACP, Evanston North Shore NAACP, and founding member of the Reparations Stakeholders Authority of Evanston. And I know you also trace your family back quite a ways in Evanston. Yes. And Rabbi London is Senior Rabbi of Beth Emet, which is my rabbi, and she's an outspoken leader when it comes to social justice issues in Evanston and Israel, Palestine. In addition, Beth Emet has committed over the past several months to educating our congregation about reparations, both local and federal. And you've also both been instrumental in bringing our faith communities together in Evanston to celebrate and support each other across race and religion, to rally and protest and mourn after tragedies. And then we also come together to celebrate and remember positive things like Martin Luther King's legacy. Every year I do a fundraiser, a personal fundraiser for Evanston Reparations. This is the third year I've done it. Evanston has been considered a progressive city with progressive residents and values. And we've come together across race and faith over and over to protest injustice and support each other. We've rallied after Charlottesville, after the murder of George Floyd, after the police shooting of Jacob Blake and the racist violence in Charlottesville, the terror shooting of Black church-goers at Mother Emanuel. But few white residents really know or acknowledge our own racial history, past and present. And the quotidian racism that's been a slow burn over many decades. And we seldom own the privileges that we enjoy as a result of redlining, Jim Crow, and other racism, both in law and in practice. And it seems like it's harder to come together over this kind of insidious racism than it is when we do following a particular vicious act or act of terror or violence. Do you believe that Evanston's Reparations Initiative offers such an opportunity for us to come together and or to continue it happening in Evanston and also federally?
Yes, I do think that it is an important opportunity that we have in our community. And Nina, you pointed out so powerfully, that we're able to come together when something happens somewhere else. But when it hits close to home, sometimes it's a little more challenging because then we have to really look inside and we have to address our own culpability in what has happened in our community. And that's much more challenging, but also very important. And I think that coming to grips with the racist policies within our own community is important. Learning that history, understanding that history, and then making reparations, which is really taking responsibility for that history. That it's not just enough to say, oh, yes, this happened, and now everything's okay. This happened, and we know that the Black community has suffered financially and in other ways because of the discrimination. And when that happens, it's our responsibility to make reparations. And the reparations, I think, need to be both financial and a bit of a truth and reconciliation, that we come to grips with the fact that we have had a racist past where racism still exists within our community. And that's much more painful and difficult to do it internally, but also very important.
So when you ask whether or not this is an opportunity, reparations for our community to come together, it is. Keep in mind, there are 100 or 1,000 entry points that people can make in this movement toward trying to repair damage. And reparations, of course, is one of those major entry points. It is, of course, as you all know, it's the first step on a 1,000-mile journey. We're talking in Evanston now about $10 million over a 10-year period through Resolution 126 through the city. And now we're talking about the Stakeholders Authority of Evanston raising more dollars. We know in reality that there are not enough dollars in the world to make up for the kind of repair that needs to be done, because it's not just economic damage that was done. It's not just social damage that was done, but, we're talking about emotional damage and years of trauma being passed on from one generation to another. So there's psychological devastation that's going on. And of course, there's the dynamic of spiritual damage that has occurred as well. And what I love about our gathering together this afternoon, Nina, is that you have two clergy persons coming together representing faith communities. And the idea of us being able to come together is that we're looking at reparations, I think, in the largest perspective. So it's not just money, but how can we truly improve our relations? And how can we forge a way into the Black community where so many generations of damage has been done, and begin to unpack that and to move that away so that new generations will not have to bear the baggage of decades before.
Some people believe that the onus is exclusively on government entities. And you mentioned the Reparations Stakeholders Authority, which is a private entity. Even some people even believe just the federal government should pay reparations for systemic harm. Why do you think it's important, or even critical and urgent, for Evanston's faith community, particularly, to collectively support local reparations by encouraging individuals and congregational contributions?
So, Nina, it seems to me that that looking at reparations from a national perspective through the federal government is one thing. Yeah, I do think that HR 40 is critical, and at some point it needs to pass both the House and the Senate and to be approved by the president, and that needs to happen. But that does not put a face on reparations. It just becomes another federal program. It's an important program, don't get me wrong, but it becomes a federal program like Head Start. It becomes a federal program like Jenny May, but it's not a program where you're putting human faces and a human touch on it. So what has to happen, it seems to me, and what Evanston has gotten right locally, we're able to put faces and names to people so that we're building partnerships and collaborations and building friendships. And when you talk about houses of worship and faith communities, then we have an opportunity to come together in so many ways around reparations that creates new opportunities for friendship and new opportunities for our houses of worship to gather together in ways that we haven't done before. And I think that's important. This is a small community. It's only 8 square miles. Everybody ought to know everybody, but but we don't. And this is an opportunity for us to begin to forge ahead and make those kinds of relationships that really work towards building beloved community.
And also, when people think they know each other, they don't really know each other's deep stories. And I think that that's what Pastor Nabors is talking about. Go to school together, and we socialize together perhaps, and work together, but we don't necessarily know people's personal stories of racism and of trauma. And part of the local reparations movement is to really be able to hear those stories and understand those stories. I mean, to think about the 25 ancestors in Evanston who recently received some of the first reparations money from the city. It's important that we understand their stories and what the discrimination was, and for us to really sit with that this is not something that happened far away. This is something happened right here in our community to people that we really know. And I think that when people really hear people's personal stories, it has an impact on how they work towards reparations on a federal level as well. If it's just something, as Dr. Nabors was saying, something abstract, another program for some people who were discriminated against, it doesn't really hit home and we don't really understand it. And I actually think that starting with the reparations on a local level is the right way to go. That if communities do this on a local level, then they're going to say, we need to do this on a federal level as well, because we know that financially we can't provide everything that's needed, but we're beginning to be able to provide the spiritual and the ethical backing for reparations. And I think that that's when we'll see the movement on a federal level. I don't think we're going to see it the other way around. You don't get something from the abstract to the particular. You go from the particular to the larger to the abstract. And that's exactly what we're doing here in Evanston.
For the last 6 years, I've been hearing people's stories from in the Black community, and that's very, very much why I'm so committed to this. Because when you do hear stories, you realize how much you socialize with people and don't know their truth. Once you know that background, it's a moral imperative. What can we learn from the two different faith traditions, the Jewish tradition, the Black Baptist tradition, that makes supporting reparations imperative?
Well, within Judaism, we have a concept of tshuva, which we sometimes translate as repentance. And it's something that we focus on our high holy days. We look internally and we try to see what we've done over the past year and how we can make amends for what we've done in the past. The word tshuva in Hebrew means to return, to go back. And we know that we can't move forward without going back, which is exactly what we're talking about in terms of reparations, that you can't just gloss over something that's happened in the past and say, oh, well, I hurt somebody's feelings, last year and I don't need to do anything about it. No, Jewish tradition says, no, actually, that when you've done something that has been wrong, you have to go back and make amends for it. You can't just say, we're just going to move forward from here. And so that's a very important part of the Jewish tradition. So important that we spend an entire season of the year just focused on that idea. And I think that's exactly what reparations is about, is we have to go back and we have to look at the past and we have to make amends. You can't just say, sorry. When my kids used to say to me, I'm sorry, I would say to them, so what are you going to do differently in the future? What are we going to do to make amends for this? But saying I'm sorry is not enough. It's just lip service. And that's what reparations is. Reparations is saying, no, we really take seriously that when we've hurt somebody that we need to make amends. And Jewish tradition talks about that. We also know that from the story of the Exodus from Egypt, which the Jewish community is now reading as part of our annual Torah reading cycle, we're in the book of Exodus and reading about our slavery and our freedom from Egypt, is that God made the Egyptians open their, I don't know, I can say open their hearts to us, but certainly open their wallets to us, shall we speak. And so they gave us a jewelry and other kinds of precious things that we could take. And these have been seen in later Jewish tradition as reparations, that the reason that we got these things was because we had been enslaved and we deserved something as we were leaving, and that we, needed to have that in order to start our life. And so Jewish tradition already says from our origin story is slavery and receiving reparations. If that's our origin story, then maybe when we see the origin story here of our own country, of our Black citizens, their origin story is slavery. Well, then the next part of the story needs to be reparations. So clearly, the Jewish community has seen that in its own past and knows that it's important when we see it in our country that we need to live by the values of our tradition.
Yeah. Rabbi, I really appreciate your sharing your story out of the context of your faith community, and also bringing up the fact that it really does parallel to a large degree the story of the we would call it the African American experience, but the larger way of defining it is those out of the African diaspora. So it's not just those who wound up on the North American continent, but we're talking about those who wound up in the Caribbean, those who wound up in South America and Central America, but all of that under the context and the umbrella of the institution of slavery. So that becomes a major point. For us, we don't believe that's our starting point. So, we have historians and scholars who are insistent upon going back to prior to slavery, where our people actually lived on the continent of Africa and thrived and succeeded and all of that, and then slavery came. With regard to the story about the Egyptians opening their hearts, it's very kind of you to say that. We know they open up their wallets and their purses. Right. We hope that they open up their hearts, as you explained. But I do think that coming of age, is where we are right now, after so many years of slavery, 240 years, after over 100 years of separate but equal through Jim Crow, and after these other 100 years of just general suffering because of discrimination and different forms of racism, there's a lot to be made up. There's so much damage that has been done. And one of the things that I want to share with you, and Nina, I hope that this is okay. We like our stories. So, I've been trying to finish this book for the last couple of years, and it is historical fiction, but it is also very much based upon the life of my own family. And so I'm going back and able to go all the way back to the Revolutionary War, which many Black families are not able to do that, but I'm grateful that we're able to do that. But I do want to share that my great grandmother, who was the one that wound up in Evanston in 1893, her family came from Indiana, and her father fought in the Civil War along with a brother. They both fought in the battle at Fort Wagner with the 54th Regiment out of Massachusetts. That's made famous from the movie Glory, starring Denzel Washington. And her uncle was killed. Of course, her father lived, but her uncle Thomas Ampey was killed. We were looking for the rest of her siblings, and she had many more siblings. There were 11 of them all together, and we found everybody but one. And last week, one of my cousins who's on this effort found out about the one uncle that we were not able to find, that they came from Richmond, Indiana. And I just want to share with you what she sent me. And it's the form of a newspaper article from the Indianapolis News, Marion County, June 30th, 1885. The dead body of James Ampey, who disappeared from Richmond on Friday the 19th, was found yesterday afternoon 9 miles north of that place. From appearances, Ampey had gone from a field in which he had been working, climbed a tree, fastening one end of a 2-foot rope to a limb, and hung himself. He evidently remained hanging until the heavy rains rotted the rope and his body slumped to the ground. So obviously, we do not believe that James Ampey hung himself during a time when Indiana, right after Reconstruction, became filled with as much racism as any of the southern states. But that's just one story from one Black family. And I'll tell you, it's a sobering story because so many of us, like so many of our Jewish brothers and sisters from the Holocaust, have family members that suffered in such a way that, again, no amount of reparations can make up for that. And then I also want to state, which is very important, my family is able to trace their connection to literally every war that was fought, all the way back to the Revolutionary War. So fighting in the war for the independence of America, fighting to protect the rights of America and the freedom that America espouses thereafter, and yet always coming home to face a more bitter enemy and adversary in the form of racism is just absolutely incredible. And I think that's why in Evanston, again, we're doing something so tremendous that can be a pioneering model and example for other communities around the country. So I just wanted to share that story.
Thank you.
Pastor Nabors is talking about, the Holocaust, and we certainly know that Jews who survived the Holocaust, that they did receive reparations. So that's another time in our history in which we receive reparations. Certainly it doesn't take away the trauma. It doesn't bring back the 6 million people who died. We can't do that through reparations. So when people say we shouldn't do reparations because it doesn't take away the trauma and it doesn't bring people back, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. That's not a reason not to do it. We still need to do it, and still also acknowledge that it doesn't take away the loss, the pain, the suffering, and the trauma. But it begins the process of healing. And we need to begin that process of healing, and to say we don't need to look up at the past or to make amends for it, or we can just move forward and heal in that way, is not right. And as I said, it's not how we see things from a spiritual perspective. And so I really am troubled when people say we don't need to do reparations, so it's not going to really do anything.
Or I wasn't here when it happened, or we didn't.
I'm not responsible. I didn't do anything. My family, and certainly for the Jewish community, we can say my family wasn't here. I can't trace my family back nearly as far as you can. Pastor Nabors, my family hasn't been here nearly as long as your family has been here. Just a few generations. And
my answer to that is often, history is today. history's with us. What do you both consider the most appropriate role or roles for the faith community to help advance reparations in Evanston?
So let me start with that, Nina. I think, as I said before, that there are 100 different starting points for folks to come into this concept of reparations at the local community, and one of them is simply beginning the process of forming relationships where there haven't been relationships before. I think that faith communities may be the best organizations or institutions to be able to do that and lead that charge. I think as diverse as Evanston is and as progressive as we are, we still sort of live in silos, and for the most part, there's a large swath of folks in this community that don't know anybody else outside of their own concentric circle, whether that be their faith community or whatever. So I would love to see other houses of worship form relationships in the way that Beth, Emet, and Second Baptist have formed a relationship now going back, 25 or 30 years or whatever. I think that we have moved beyond we have moved beyond black and white in terms of forming this relationship, and even beyond faith. Even though we're part of the Judeo-Christian heritage, we have two distinct different faith communities, and that has not impinged our opportunity to develop relationships and friendships. So I think that's the most important thing that houses of worship can do. I think there are other things as well, though. And I think that if we are talking about financial consideration or economic opportunities, I think houses of worship can give what they can. I mean, we're in COVID, we're definitely experiencing hard times. Many houses of worship are, but I think in giving, they might be able to look at the outcome of what that giving is. I know for the Stakeholders Authority, we will be working at trying to establish programs. And I think the city is going to do that as well. So it's not just a payout to individuals, even though individuals may deserve that, they may want it, and that may be one step. But I think other steps are opportunities for programs to be developed to break the wealth gap that exists between black and white, and to break that curse, of family poverty that many families of color are experiencing. And one way of doing that, is education. It's education. So what can we do? I'm so proud of Beth, Emet, and what y'all have over there, because you got a school. It's a school where you are able to influence, from the very earliest, children, and all the way up to a certain age, and to teach them not only the sort of ABCs, but also their own history and their own tradition. And I think that it would be great for African-American houses of worship to have that kind of opportunity to do the same thing. Yeah. For every single black and brown child to have an opportunity, if they want to go to college without worrying about acquiring so much debt that they'll never get out of it.
I think there are a few things that the religious community can provide. Sometimes people, want to criticize organized religion. And I said, well, it's better than disorganized religion. And what I mean by that is that we are communities that know each other, that spend time together, that can organize, that can do things together. And because of that, we can mobilize people. So organized religion has that advantage of people already in relationship with each other. As I've already spoken about, when you're in a relationship and you know each other's stories, you can mobilize and do things. And so I think that we've been able to mobilize within our community to do educational programs, both with Second Baptist and also on our own, to teach people about the history of our country, to think about white supremacy, and to grow in our understanding. And that has been, very, very powerful, because again, if we're going to talk about reparations, people donating money, what are we donating money to unless we understand it? And so we have, because we're an organized community, have been able to offer that. That's number one. Number two, I think that we really offer the ethical imperative that a religious community says this is why we need to do this ethically, And I think that that is important, and it really does move people. And I also think that people are moved to do something, not just when they're told intellectually, this is what we're supposed to be doing. And religious communities understand that when we can marry the head and the heart and the soul together, then we really can be a powerful force. And we live in a society in which sometimes we want to separate the head from the heart, and the soul goes over here as well. And a religious community says, no, 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 no. We are a whole human being, and we are going to treat the whole human being. So we're going to do education, and we're going to do prayer, and we're going to develop relationships with each other. And through all of those things, we're going to be this powerful force that can make a difference in the world. And I think that that's what we see from the religious community. And I know at Beth Emet, we have really worked on educating our community regarding the history of our country and racism for many, many, many years now. And then we've really added this layer of reparations and why we think it's important to do reparations within our community. And we are about to also embark on fundraising as a community. And we've also talked with the other religious institutions in town and said, what if we got together as all of the, churches and synagogues and mosques and other religious institutions and said, we're going to put a goal out there. We're going to raise money together and to say that religion is not just about sitting and praying, but that, as Abraham Joshua Heschel said when he was with Martin Luther King and marching down in Selma, when I was marching, my feet were praying. And our two congregations really believe that when we live by our values, that's how we implement our prayer. That prayer is something that gives us the strength when we walk out of those moments to actually do something in the world. We say in our morning service, "Ani tefillati lecha," which means I am my prayer to you, O God. It's not just words. I have the ability to live as a prayer. And I think this is one of the ways in which we really implement prayer and make prayer real.
Pastor Nabors, I mentioned at the top that you are one of the founding members of the Reparations Stakeholders Authority of Evanston, the RSAE. And I thought it would be important to talk about, as briefly as you can, just to explain who the RSAE is, what it is, and how it complements the city's reparations initiative.
So Nina, I think it's important to make the distinction between what's happening with the city, which is so important, and RSAE. RSAE was developed about a year ago when a group of folks started talking about what more needed to be done beyond the arc of the city. And we were able to surmise that while $10 million sounds like an awful lot of money, over a 10-year period, it's not a lot of money for the thousands and thousands of African Americans and Blacks that live in the Evanston community. And so we decided that one of the things that might be helpful is starting a nonprofit organization that really is reflective and representative of the larger group of African Americans in the community. So we started the necessary paperwork to put together a 501c3. And the first person that we talked to was the former president and CEO of the Evanston Community Foundation, Monique Jones. When she was president, we approached her about this idea, and she loved the idea, and she thought it was such a good idea that she said, "We will help you." And so what has happened is we have been able to partner with the Evanston Community Foundation. They've been especially prodigious in lending human resources to us in terms of aiding our effort at starting the nonprofit, and also any contributions coming in. The Evanston Community Foundation is managing that on behalf of RSAE, which is just a really good and important piece. They have a great management ability over there when it comes to funding. And so what we have been doing over the last year is forming a board that represents the wider community. So on that board, we have representatives from several of the historical African American churches, and also our what we call the Divine Nine, which are 9 sororities and fraternities that are historically Black, are sitting on that board, and other folks as well. We have decided that we need maybe between 18 and 25 members to reflect the larger community, and we're not quite at that number yet, but we'll probably get that in the first few months of this year. That board then will be responsible for determining how funding will be given out to the Black community with regard to reparations. And then the funding aspect, again, is taken care of by the Evanston Community Foundation. And right now, I think that we probably have about $75,000 that has been raised, and that is before we've done any publicity. So that's the difference. The money with the city is money that is raised through the taxation of cannabis from dispensaries that are in the Evanston community, and that money is solely shelled out under the auspices of the city, determined by the city council. They will have the final say on how that money is being dispersed, like the housing that just started on Friday with the first 16 families. The reparations money from RSAE doesn't have that kind of hierarchy. So we have the board that is working with the community that will determine how that money can most effectively assist in the repair of damage that has been done to Blacks as a result of racism.
I think it's important because, it's a little bit confusing for people. I, for example, have chosen, individuals and organizations can also contribute to the city fund. I've chosen to focus on the RSAE fund that's held at ECF, because it, complements the city, and because once the money from the city is no more, this will go on. And so for me, that's the reason I've chosen to put all my effort into the RSAE. And I just wanted to clarify that even though it's held at the ECF, the money is administered completely by the RSAE. Often when I talk to people about contributing to reparations in Evanston, especially to, both, I think the city and to the fund at ECF, I ask people not to take a tax benefit from it, because it is reparative money, it's reparations. And so to me, I feel that a white person contributing shouldn't benefit in any way. It should be a clean-cut contribution. And then the other thing I do often say to folks is that contributing to the reparations fund, whichever one you choose to do, should not replace any other contributions you're giving to other organizations in Evanston that are working on equity issues, racial equity issues.
I don't know, Dr. Nabors, if you have an opinion, if people are going to give money, if they should give it to the city fund or the RSAE, if you have a preference.
I don't think that I do. I don't think I have a preference, because I think that both of them are working hard to engage in repairing the damage. And again, one of them, the contribution to the city, will be a contribution that will go to a fund that is determined by the subcommittee and by the alderman. And if you give to the RSAE, then that decision of how the money will be distributed will be specifically done through the board, which represents, I think, to a larger degree, the African-American community, because of the numbers of people that are on the board.
What do you consider to be the most compelling reasons that white and non-Black Evanston residents should contribute to reparations in Evanston?
For me, Nina, I think that it all has to do with what kind of community do you want to live in? What kind of town do you want to best reflect your perspective about how a town should be? And for me, ever since I arrived in Evanston, I've always talked about the possibility of it being a beloved community. much more than any community that I've ever been in, maybe with the exception of Princeton, and Princeton only because it's much smaller and doable, with only about 20,000 people, but not nearly as diverse as Evanston. So when I think about a beloved community, I think about a portion of the kingdom. I think about what heaven might look like in terms of all of our differences, all of our faith differences, all of our to a degree, ideological differences, all of our race and ethnic differences, all of that. I mean, we speak 100 different languages in this community. And the ability for us to then, in the midst of all of that diversity, to find an opportunity for us to be united. And part of that movement toward unity is helping others, is helping to repair the damage of some of those that have been struggling because of past and sometimes present forms of discrimination. To me, I think that is a major step in what building beloved community is all about. It is saying, I'm going to take some responsibility. I'm going to engage in some sacrifice and some effort and energy to make this town better. And this is how I can do it. I can give a few dollars. I can join an organization like the NAACP, or I can decide that I'm going to support this program that is a result of reparations. Any of those, I think, are wonderful, wonderful movements toward breaking down barriers that exist and building bridges so that we are truly one community and not a community of several different parts.
Making a contribution to the Reparations Fund as somebody who is white is acknowledging the privilege that people who have white skin have received in this country. Even if you are Jewish or have other ethnic backgrounds in which you might have faced some discrimination, we do know that having white skin has been a benefit to people. And so I think it's a way of acknowledging that this is the way our country has been set up and continues to run, and that that's an important thing that we are saying. And obviously, that every person needs to look into their own pocketbook and to see how much money they can contribute. But I think what's important is not the actual dollars, but the effort to do something, to say, I believe in this and I see what has happened. And even if I am white and I don't have a lot of money, I do understand that I have received some benefit and I'm going to make a contribution. There is a law within Judaism that even if you are the recipient of tzedakah funds, meaning even if you have to receive money, from the government or from the community to support yourself, you are still obligated to give. You can't say, well, I receive funds and so therefore I don't give. That everybody has to make that contribution. And so I really encourage people, you have to look within your own heart and understand what's happened within the country and to see the history and to say, based on what I've seen and looking within my own heart and my pocketbook, this is what I can contribute. And this is what I do because I want to, as Pastor Nabors is saying, I want to create the beloved community. And in order to do that, I need to make an effort and to try to repair the damage that's been done. And so I really do encourage people, and I believe in this cause and have preached about it at our congregation, and we're working on this very hard at Beth Emet, and we'll be fundraising for it as well and providing whatever kind of support, because we do really feel that this is going to make a difference in creating here in Evanston a model community. And we can only do that if we join our hands and our hearts and our pocketbooks together to make it happen.